Hey everyone! Last time we had a great conversation going through the top 10 most questions asked about salmon oil with Donnie.
Yeah, and we learned a lot of its benefits, limits, and a lot more. Now, today we'll be talking about an interesting topic. Dr. Amber, do you like to hike?
I love hiking. Unfortunately, we haven't been on many. We've been really busy, but I do love hiking.
Me too.
And I bet some of our listeners love hiking too. And they bring their fur babies with them. So why don't we talk about it?
Yeah, I think so. Hiking is so much fun, especially with your pets. It's a good way to exercise and at the same time spend time with your babies or fur babies. So today, I want to talk about, or we will be talking about, like, what are the plants to avoid or plants to keep watch while you're hiking with your dogs or animal.
All right, let's get started.
So we're here to talk about pets, pet nutrition and wellness, anything that can help our fur children live a longer, vibrant, and happier lives.
All right.
Yeah. Welcome to Vital Pet Life Podcast.
I'm Dr. Amber, your official veterinarian at Vital Pet Life.
And this is Donnie, your chief treat lady. All right. So, Dr. Amber, what are the plants that are toxic to dogs when they get in contact on a trail?
Yeah, so anything that's toxic or irritating to humans, I would consider, let's just stay away from that to be safe. So poison ivy, contact toxicity for dogs is actually pretty rare just because they're all covered in fur, but it can happen. So anything that you would avoid touching yourself, keep your dog away from.
But how do you I know I know there are parks that allows dog to be off leash, and there's also like parks that are putting dogs like it had to be on leash. But let's just say like parks that you let the dogs wander around and they love sniffing and all those stuff. So I've seen like a lot of foxtails by me. I mean, I know how stressful that is. Like, I know how dangerous like that little barley type of plant actually is, even if it's so like scary to humans. I'm not affected to it. As you mentioned, like anything that I, as a person, won't touch should, not be the plant that the dogs also or animals could be in contact. But like, just like foxtail, like I don't think I'm allergic to foxtails, but how deadly it is or scary it is to be in contact with animals.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as far as, a plant toxin touching the skin, causing like burns or blisters, that type of thing, not very common in dogs. But foxtails are very dangerous, and not because they're toxic, but because of the way that the plants are made, the way that the makeup of the plant. So if you're unfamiliar with foxtails, they're long bits of grass seeds. So they look like this. They're kind of spiky and only about this big. So they're really tiny. But they have a pointy end on the opposite end. So the pointy end is down here. They have kind of the foxtailish part, the fluffy part on the end. So this sharp end will actually penetrate into the skin. Obviously it first starts out on the fur, but on this grassy end, they have little barbs that are in the opposite direction. So once they contact something, they burrow deeper and deeper. So, not toxic, but dangerous because of that physical penetration of the skin. So you can't avoid them altogether, especially in public places. But, one thing that you might want to consider is keeping your dog on a leash at first, kind of get a layout of the land, see, we need to avoid this part because there's a lot of those types of grass seeds, grass weeds over there. And then, inevitably, I mean, it can happen. I took my dog on a hike. I live close to the mountains. We went up to the mountains, had a great time hiking, and got back, and my dog was covered in foxtails.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so I never took him on that trail again because he had so many. And my dog was black. The foxtails are kind of tan colored. But I had a hard time finding them. I mean, they burrow in really quickly
Wow.
and then they disappear
Yeah,
in the fur. Um,
exactly.
so when you get back from hiking, I would always just like run over their whole body. And obviously, on a long haired dog, it can be harder to find them in the fur. But even short haired dogs, like those things can get in little crevices. So, really commonly between the toes. I've seen them in
Ears.
eyeballs, noses,
Oh my
ears.
God.
Yeah. Any, like, any little spot in the body they can burrow into. So one
Mm-hmm.
thing when I would have a client come in and their dog's covered in foxtails, I would actually work in the opposite direction of the fur just with my fingers. And so you can feel those little prickles of the foxtails. Same thing in between the toes, they'll kind of get like
Mm-hmm.
this, and you can go up there with your fingers and feel those little spiky ends. And so not only are they painful, but they cause infection.
Yeah.
I saw one dog who died of sepsis because of foxtails. Um,
Oh my.
but most of the time, they'll burrow deep and then they'll cause an abscess. And
Mm-hmm.
so they really do. If you notice little swellings, especially between the toes or anywhere, like if you've recently been somewhere where your dog contacted foxtails, then you definitely want to just be really aware of any type of swelling that comes after that.
Right. Also, I've noticed like there's a lot of burrs. It's the same like foxtails. Like tuxedo always has
Yeah,
that, like we
right.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those little cockleburs. Those little spikes can get into the skin and cause irritation or infection as well. I actually, this is crazy, but I saw a
Mhm.
dog that the owner had been on a hike, found a cocklebur on the side when they got home from the hike, and she pulled it out. It seemed like it wasn't a big deal. Well, then, like a couple months later, this little lump formed there. We treated, it looked like it could have been an abscess. So I treated with some
Mhm.
antibiotics. It seemed to resolve, came back, treated it again, resolved, and came back. And so we ended up, I thought, well, maybe this is something different. It's not an infection. It doesn't have anything to do with the cocklebur. It's just
Mhm.
coincidental. And so we
Mhm.
actually ended up removing because it had formed like a little lump underneath the skin about the
Oh
size of the
God.
tip of my thumb. Yeah. So I
Mhm.
removed it thinking, well, maybe this is a cancerous tumor or something.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we sent it in for pathology, and sure enough, they found a little bit of plant material right in the middle of that thing. So that
Oh.
little spikes of the cocklebur had gotten into the skin, and then the body just walled it off and formed this hard, it's called a granuloma, um, just this hard infection. It's a reaction to infection that the body kind of
Mhm.
thickens up that tissue, sends a lot of white blood cells, and then it forms this really hard mass. So
Wow.
obviously that's worst case scenario.
Oh yeah,
But you
yeah.
just want
But
to be aware.
this is what we're
Yeah.
talking. Yeah, but this is what we're talking about. Things that we need to worry about because, like, as innocent as a afternoon hike can cause like crazy stuff, like as just you've mentioned, So
Right.
things to be aware of.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, I
and as far as treatment, I can go over that quickly. So most of the time, if the foxtails are deeply embedded, it requires sedation. Um,
think.
if they're down into the ears, sometimes they're sitting right on top of the eardrum. And so you need to
Oh,
sedate those dogs and cats. I've seen them in cats too. So you want to just, we have to sedate, we have to go over the whole body and try to pull out as many of those foxtails as we can, pain meds, antibiotics. And sometimes you don't find them, you don't get them all. And
I
so
know.
you
It's
just want to,
100%.
follow up, watch for swelling later on. I mean, I've seen them. I saw a dog that got him in the paw, had an opening
Mhm.
here, and the foxtail
Oh God.
had migrated
Can you
all the
feel
way
it?
from the top of the paw to
Oh
the
God.
back of the arm. Like it had there
Oh
was a
my
tunnel
God.
all the way from here and it popped out the back.
Wow.
So anyway, they're
That
crazy.
tiny
They're crazy
foxtail.
things. Yep. Yeah, you think,
Oh,
oh, it's just a grass seed, no big deal, but they are nasty.
I know. Oh my
And they're
goodness.
mostly in the West.
Yeah, we have it a lot
Veterinarians from the
here.
East kind of joke about it's just something we made up, but they're they're real and mostly in the
Yeah.
Western United States.
Oh, for sure. Like I see that all the time. That I'm always like wary every time. Like every time a little speck. Because sometimes I let him like go off leash in a certain area, but I'm like, oh no, there's some. Like I always make sure that I follow him around and make sure that I'm looking at his face, his body, even the butt. Like I feel like it.
Oh yeah. Yep, I've seen them everywhere, even there. Yep.
Yeah. Well, other than plants, like I feel like, the most common thing, like now we discuss like fucktails, like the burr. Um, I feel like insects. There's a lot of insects. Like you could easily like get like ticks and fleas
Yep.
because of a height. Yeah. So,
Right.
what are the stuff that you really recommend? Like when it's really like summer, like when it's time for, I feel like, warm weather, I always try to give him like his medicine. I try not to give it to him
Mhm.
most of the time, but when I know that when we're going out a lot, I tend to give it to him. He gets trifexis. What can
Mhm.
you recommend? Maybe if people can't afford, or like a lot of people can't have like access to tick meds, what are the organic, or like is there some off the counter that you can recommend, or is it just medication?
Yeah, so medication and physical removal really is the best. Um, a frontline is over the counter and pretty reasonable in price. So that's something that's available to everybody without a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends on the area of the country, too. Like where I live, it's really dry. We don't have a lot of fleas and ticks, but in
Mm-hmm.
other parts of the country, it's a year round problem. And
Yeah.
so, in my area, I recommend during the summer putting them on a flea and tick medication if they're going to be out hiking and camping and stuff like that. And then obviously when you return from those trips, just do a whole body check and see if you find any of the ticks. And then in some parts of the country, like the South, where it's really humid, it's warm most of the time,
Oh God.
most of the year, they probably need medication all year round. And that goes for heartworm too. Some of those
Mm-hmm.
products treat heartworm or prevent
Mm-hmm.
heartworm. And certainly for the South, I mean, they need that year round or they will get heartworm. In some other areas where it's not as common, you're kind of taking a risk if you don't put your
Mm-hmm.
dog on heartworm medication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of that to say, I think just being really vigilant about checking their skin, especially if you're in an area that has a lot of fleas and ticks, and then get them on that prevention if you can.
Yeah. So now that we've discussed like the two common things to look for, like I think another very important thing when you hike with your pets is making sure that you're hydrated. And I feel like,
Yes.
making sure that if it's because I've seen, I know this is like worst case scenario, but I've seen people's pets die from hiking because it was too hot for them, or
Yep.
at the same time like really know if the dog is really capable of hiking that long.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's your take on that? I'm kind of crazy sometimes. Like I touch, like if it's too warm, and I know like times that it feels like I mean it's 70s, but kind of feels like 80.
Yeah.
I always try to touch the surface if it's too warm for Tuxedo to walk to. But yeah, I feel like that's the kind of precaution that I do. But what can you recommend to people that are just starting, have pets and try to do some outdoor activities like hiking?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, definitely if it's, I mean, always hydrate no matter what the temperature is. But if it's uncomfortable for you, it's definitely going to be uncomfortable for your dog. And so you want to pack plenty of water, go earlier in the morning or later in the evening when the temperatures drop. And if your dog is not accustomed to hiking, don't take them on like 5 mile hike. Start out slow. I mean, they need to gain their
Right.
muscle, like they need to get in shape for hikes too. Don't just think that your couch potato dog can suddenly hike up a mountain. So go slow, just like if I were starting out, then I'd, just do some walks around the neighborhood, pick some easy
Yeah, 30
hikes
minutes
until
walk.
I got
Yeah,
into better shape and I could handle a longer or more rigorous hike.
totally. Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Drinking out of river water, you just want to be really careful. Yeah, I would, even though we may not think about it and we're like, oh, our dog's just playing in the stream or playing in the lake. But there's things like leptospirosis in certain parts of the country that can cause liver and kidney failure. I mean, it's a really serious illness if they get lepto and it's spread by wildlife and it lives in water, giardia. So there are some risks to letting your pets play or drink, certainly drink the water in lakes and rivers. And so I would always pack fresh water, whatever you're drinking, that's what your dog should be drinking too, just to be extra cautious. And I know
Yes.
it's not feasible for everybody, or I tend to be like the extra cautious fur parent because I've seen so many things in practice that I want to try to avoid in my own pets. But if you've let your dog swim in the lake and you come back and suddenly, oh, there's diarrhea or he's not wanting to eat, or there's any kind of symptoms after that, then you want to be taking him into the veterinarian. We also get toxic algae blooms where I live, and I know it's pretty common around the
Yeah.
country. And
Yeah.
so you want
Yeah.
to check those reports. On my local news, there's always some story about toxic algae blooms in this reservoir. And
Mhm.
so just be really vigilant about where you take your dog because of those things.
That's true. Like even when we were like a year ago, I think when we were in Tahoe, like there were algae blooms there too, and it was kind of scary. So we were
Yeah.
kind of
And
scared. Dogs wanted to play.
right. And algae, that toxic algae happens fast and they die really quickly. So I would just avoid it if I could, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome that we were able to talk all this. Like, it's pretty basic, but it's something like life saving if you are aware of it, especially for your animal. Yeah.
Well, that's it for our hiker fur parents. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to follow our channel for more talk about pets, tips, advice, and more fun stuff.
Happiness, vibrance, and longevity for our fur babies and our planet.
Once again, thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. Amber, your official veterinarian at Vital Pet Life.
This is Donnie, your chief treat lady at Vital Pet Life.
I hope these tips will help you and go a long way to keeping your fur baby safe when you hike.
Have a podtastic weekend. Until next time. Yay!
Did we do it?
Did it.